Archie, when looking for an advisor, what's most important to you?
Well, Jimmy, that's a great question. I'd say it's got to be a fiduciary. Weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. This is Last Paycheck. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, Archie Hoxton and Jimmy Such. And today we're going to talk about a really important topic. It's related to our profession, and for someone who's looking to work with a financial advisor, kind of one of the most important criteria to look for is if they are a fiduciary.
Yeah, it's almost like a buzzword at this point.
Yeah, it's become way more popular in recent years because there are more people who are fiduciaries, at least in some regard.
And there's a lot more people that want to work with one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's actually crazy. You know, if you think about our profession or various segments of it, you know, if we think about financial planning, kind of came into being in like the 1960s when you had guys who were like doing mutual funds, guys that were doing insurance and annuities and, you know, CPAs, and they all sort of came together and was like, well, what if we sort of combine our skill set into a new profession? Here we are, you know, 80 years later, and we're now like finally fiduciary is becoming an important thing. It seems like this should have been like from day one really popular, but as anything.
The industry's kind of evolved and it wants to kind of continue to remove conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
Right. So the world of commissions, hopefully you don't work with too many people that are compensated in a transaction. Right. Yeah. And they're just more compensated to work on your behalf.
Yeah.
Provide you some good guidance.
Or if they are, they at least they are held to the standard of like your interests come first. They come before the interests of the professional you're working with.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
they have to make a recommendation that doesn't make great financial sense for them, but makes great financial sense for you. And that's, I think, maybe we should start with kind of
what is a fiduciary?
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead?
A fiduciary is essentially, it's the simplest way to look at it is that it's someone who has a legal obligation or an obligation of some kind to act in your best interest, ideally legal obligation. And that is sort of like, that's the big picture. What that means in practice, there's lots of different ways to interpret it. But I just keep it simple. They act in your best interest, no matter what, even if it means that their best interest is kind of set to the side because it's not what's best for you.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why everybody wants to work with one, right? When you're sitting on the other side of the desk and receiving some advice or counsel, you just want to make sure that it's coming from a good place, right?
Right.
And it's not lining anybody else's pockets or anything like that.
Yeah. I like to think of it. So my dad, Rob, who you all know if you're regular listeners, always tells this story of a guy who, when he started his career in New York, and he would go to a Brooks Brothers, and he would buy a suit once a month until he could kind of build up a wardrobe that was, you know, befitting the New York lifestyle. Right. And he went, and every time he'd go to the same guy, and he would buy these suits. And one day, someone pointed out to him that he wears olive green suits really often. And then he realized that he had bought 3 olive green suits and didn't realize it because he's colorblind.
That's right.
And so people just thought the guy really likes olive green suits.
Yeah. Great color.
Now the suit fit, but the guy who was selling him the suit wasn't necessarily acting in his best interest. Or another way to look at it, the suit fits, but it doesn't look good or it doesn't fit your full wardrobe. It's very, you just keep selling something that you could justify, but isn't necessarily the very best option for you.
Right.
You want a suit that fits, that looks good, that fills out your wardrobe. Not to just sell a suit because it fits, and it doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter if you get the same one. There's that extra level to being a fiduciary.
Yeah, so there is the fiduciary standard. So essentially, that person legally is bound and has to act in your best interest, right?
Right.
So then there is this thing called the suitability standard.
Yeah.
And so what's that?
The suitability standard is kind of like, it's like what the guy actually did. You are selling a
Literally
selling a
suitability.
suit. Yeah. It's suitable. It is a suit, for one. It fits.
Yeah.
But maybe, maybe you don't look good in it. But maybe the reason, and so this is where it gets complicated, is like you can you still have to have some kind of justification.
Like there was a need for the suit.
Yeah.
Is about as general as it can be.
He needed a suit.
Right.
I gave him a suit.
Mm.
Now I get where it gets complicated is I get commissions on olive green suits, let's say.
Right.
So I might sell you 3 olive green suits because the navy blue suit and the gray suit, I don't get, a nice commission on, or maybe not as much. So you need a suit, I give you 3 suits. But so this is where sort of a conflict of interest can come in when there's not that added layer of, no, you have to look good. It has to fill out your wardrobe.
Mm-hmm. It's just like some basic criteria needs to be met before I can sell you this suit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an older model, and now even at a legal level, there are fewer people who can actually get away with investment recommendations that don't meet the fiduciary standard.
Yeah, and it's interesting in our line of work too. There are almost hybrid models.
Yeah.
So in the broker dealer world, there are a client might have 4 accounts with you. 2 could be commission based, where it's suitability standards.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other 2 accounts might be advisory based or managed.
Mm-hmm.
And they fall under the criteria of fiduciary.
Yeah.
So it's a little complicated, but most of the time when it comes to working with a fiduciary, the purpose of that is trying to remove conflicts of interest.
Yeah. You want, and if you can't avoid them, you at least need to know what they are. And a fiduciary has a duty to disclose to you what, if any, conflicts they have.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are also, like you said, layers to this fiduciary relationship. That if you're making investment recommendations and maybe that person is held to a fiduciary standard with the investment recommendations,
right?
But maybe they're not held to that standard with financial planning recommendations. So if you're engaging them for
recommendations, right, or whatever it may be.
So that's where you kind of get outside of sort of the basic regulatory environment and go into more like voluntary credentials, like the CFP professional, certified financial planner professional. So that actually requires the fiduciary standard in all aspects of the client relationship. So here's a perfect example. Maybe I'm a fiduciary making investment recommendations, but I'm selling you a life insurance policy that perhaps is not exactly in your best interest, but you need life insurance, but maybe it's not the very best one for you. Kind of being a CFP can sort of take that out of the picture. It's like, all right, no, that recommendation also has to pass the fiduciary standard. So there are layers to it. The reason why we like the CFP marks is that it's an easy identifier. That guy has to be a fiduciary in everything that he does regarding recommendations made to me, whether financial planning recommendations, investment recommendations, all of the above.
And so when somebody's seeking a fiduciary, right, like what is it that they're trying to avoid? Well, why do you think it matters that they work with somebody that's a fiduciary?
Yeah, that's a great question. So,
I mean, we keep suggesting conflicts of interest, which is really, really important. And so the evolution of the industry is certainly trying to get rid of those.
Right.
So I think that's one of the reasons why it's such a buzzword at this point.
I think it comes down, I mean, this is my personal opinion. I think it comes down to if you are, we are in a position of immense trust with our
Right.
clients. They ought to know whether or not your recommendations are motivated by anything other than what the client needs and what is best for them. That could be their own financial incentive, which is, that's the conflict of interest. But also there can be real long-term effects on your net worth, the taxes that you pay, if you're being recommended something that isn't the best thing for you.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, that's I think it's important, right? When you're kind of working with a client, they want to make sure, right? And the people that are, Googling who is a fiduciary and who is not,
Yeah.
right? They just want to make sure that their interests, right, pretty much align with the person they're working with.
Here would be a good example. So part of the fiduciary duty of being a CFP is the duty of, when this is a CFP or a duty that every fiduciary ought to follow, but there's the duty of care and the duty of diligence. If you're making a recommendation, you should have a thorough justification where you've tested that recommendation to make sure that it is truly right for the client. And you're not kind of just like throwing out a rule of thumb
Right.
idea or just saying, hey, Roth conversions make sense for people in your situation in most cases, so I'm going to recommend that. Well, if you're just sort of throwing that out there without care and diligence, that could actually harm the client and not be in their best interest. So, and that could cost you money in the long run. So there is a real cost to not having that fiduciary duty where there's some accountability. Your advisor is accountable to someone to make sure that they're making good recommendations that are in your best interest. So yeah, there's a real cost, I think, to not having that extra layer.
And an interesting kind of component to this that is, at the fiduciary level, you kind of want every person involved with the business to act in your best interest as well.
Yeah.
Right. So every decision at the business level to even be on the client's behalf.
Yeah.
And so this is really unique when it comes from the world of working with those big broker dealers or an independent shop.
Yeah.
Because there's not like this corporate pressure
Yeah.
that is acting in the shareholders' behalf rather than the actual people that they serve.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how this kind of cascades up
Right.
to different levels.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because this is where you get into more of like a matter of interpretation and
Right.
spirit versus letter, where a big firm can, under the letter, act as a fiduciary. But I always like to say, how hard would it be? Would it be possible for you to walk into the office of the key decision maker of the business of your financial advisor?
Right.
Maybe your financial advisor is the key decision maker or one of them, or maybe they work directly under the key decision maker. And who are the shareholders that there? Are they the shareholders? Is your advisor, so there's another layer where it's like that company they know your needs and they make decisions knowing your needs. It's not some guy
rather than to prop up the share price of a particular stock or something like that.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Or just some sort of bureaucratic decision-making process that happens without regard to your circumstances because they would never come in contact with you.
Right.
Probably don't even know your advisor. So that's more of a personal interpretation matter.
Right.
That I would say we probably take a pretty rigid view, a pretty rigorous view of the fiduciary standard. That does not make someone technically under the law a fiduciary or not a fiduciary, but in our minds, in our interpretation, by the spirit of the law, it kind of does have an impact. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean. Another thing I would say too is compensation model can is an important part of this decision. You should know how an advisor is compensated, but it's not necessarily tied to whether they're a fiduciary or not a fiduciary. If someone is making money through commissions, they could not be a fiduciary. There could be a big conflict of interest there, or that could also be a way to avoid external conflicts of interest. And here's what I mean by that. There are advisors who are what you call fee only, meaning they only charge an assets under management or flat fee. They don't receive any kind of compensation from any third party.
No transaction-based compensation whatsoever.
Right.
Right.
So that can be a good model. And that's, you're in 100% of the time, your advisor is making recommendations that are not sort of product-based.
And everybody's seen the commercials, right? It's like, hey, when you do better, we do better. So when it was all geared around, that comp structure was all geared around trying to remove these conflicts of interest. And, hey, I don't want you necessarily to get compensated more, even if, some of the things don't go so well, right?
Right.
If the markets don't cooperate or something like that. So when it's tied to an asset-based fee, it's like you are trying to get the person you're working with to align with your interests. You both want the accounts to grow and accumulate, and you want to be wealthier at the end of the day. And
right.
If the accounts pull back, the fee is smaller. If the accounts grow, the fee's a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that structure kind of originated out of, trying to remove conflicts of interest, right?
Yeah. Now, here's a key thing that if someone maybe charges fees like that, but then also receives commissions, it's important to investigate a little bit further.
Right.
Because picture this, you have a fee-only advisor who recommends an insurance product of some kind, but refers you out to a third party. That third party maybe doesn't have a fiduciary duty to you and recommends a different kind of insurance product. And then now you've got this situation where the person making the recommendation who does have the fiduciary duty but can't sell you insurance because they've said we're never going to make a commission, now is putting you in the hands of potentially someone who has no fiduciary duty, has a duty of suitability, and they will, they may try to sell you on something you don't actually need. We've seen that happen. So it can be actually a good thing as a fiduciary to be able, because some products just don't come without commissions,
right,
and they're essential products like term life insurance is a perfect example. You recommend term life insurance. You can't provide it because you can't receive commissions. That's sort of the way you've set yourself up. You recommend to someone who does, but they're not a fiduciary.
Right.
So it's important to understand the compensation models, but don't let that be, the final decision-making factor on, who to work with, who not to. It doesn't necessarily mean someone is or isn't a fiduciary. There's a little bit more nuance to it.
And I'm sure there are people that work in 100% commission-based capacity that act in the best interest of their clients.
Yeah. Not to bash on compensation models. Right. I mean, some people would prefer a more transactional way to pay for investment advice. I mean, that's something wrong with that as long as you understand how it works.
Yeah, at the end of the day, as long as that person providing that service is acting in your best interest, it's no big deal.
And disclosing everything they need to as far as conflicts go.
Right.
So we're a little over time. We could probably talk about this for hours.
It's the F word, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the F word.
We're big fans of it. Yeah, for sure. So, we hope you like this, and we hope this is helpful if you're looking for financial advisor or planner to work with. If you have questions or you'd like to hear another topic that we haven't covered, leave us a comment. Many of our listeners are not subscribed, so we'd love it if you would hit the subscribe button, like the video, and hit the bell for notifications so you know when we drop new content. And then share it with your family and friends.
And thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.